Today's tech news moves fast, but understanding it shouldn't be hard. That's why Snarful Solutions Group brings you Connecting the Dots, where we break down what's happening in tech and why it matters to you. Now, let's dive in with your hosts.
Welcome to Connecting the Dots from Snarful Solutions Group. Broadcasting right here in Sacramento, California. I'm Alex.
And I'm Morgan.
And today is Tuesday, May 26, 2026. Before we look closer at our main mission for you today, which is, really unpacking the escalating real-world friction of this current AI boom, let's get a quick pulse check on the world outside.
Right. Definitely need to look out the window first.
Exactly. And looking out the window here in Sacramento, it's a gorgeous morning, mostly sunny, about 73 degrees Fahrenheit, and we've got some pretty light winds kicking around, maybe 3 to 7 miles per hour.
Yeah, the local weather is definitely cooperating for us.
Yeah.
But nationally, the atmospheric picture is a bit more volatile right now. Yeah, the National Weather Service is actively tracking 395 active weather alerts across the country, and 117 of those are currently active right over land masses. So definitely something to monitor if you have any cross-country travel on the books for this week.
Wow, yeah, that is a lot of alerts. Well, transitioning over to the financial markets, we actually ended last week on a surprisingly resilient note, I'd say.
Yeah, we really did.
Friday saw the Dow Jones close up over 145 points, landing at 50,579, and the S&P 500 ticked up just slightly, about 4.6 points, closing at 7,473.
Nice to see that stability.
Right. But crypto is feeling a bit of a localized pinch this Tuesday morning. Bitcoin saw a minor dip of around $546, so it's sort of hovering around $76,721 as we get our day started.
So yeah, kind of a mixed bag of indicators to kick off the week.
It really is, which, brings us to our focus for today, because we usually think of artificial intelligence as this, this pristine digital abstraction.
Like it's just software floating out there.
Exactly. It lives in a decentralized cloud. It crunches massive data sets. It writes our code. But what we are looking at in today's stack of sources, intelligence reports, financial analyses, cybersecurity investigations, is a very, very different reality.
Yeah, it's not pristine at all anymore.
No, it's not. We are watching that digital abstraction just crash headfirst into physical reality. It's creating immense friction at the societal level, the geopolitical level, and the corporate level.
Because that protective digital barrier is just officially gone. The infrastructure required to run these models is too heavy. The talent to build them is way too valuable. And, well, the vulnerabilities they create inside corporate networks are just too fast to ignore at this point.
Right. It's bleeding into the real world.
Yeah.
Today's episode is brought to you by Strong Coffee, the premium instant coffee that tastes like a traditional brew, but is packed with 15 grams of protein, MCTs, and adaptogens like ashwagandha. Get clean, sustained energy without the jitters. Use promo code SNARFUL for 20% off at strongcoffeecompany.com.
So let's unpack our Morningstar Tech report, starting with that societal friction you just mentioned.
Yeah, let's do it.
Because we have a massive and honestly somewhat alarming disclosure from Wired. They detailed over 1,000 pages of recently unpublished Freedom of Information Act documents.
Oh, wow, 1,000 pages.
Yeah, it's huge. And these are internal communications coming straight from the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, and roughly 80 different national fusion centers.
And what these intelligence hubs are actively tracking, and this is wild, is a newly coined threat category. They're calling it anti-tech violent extremism.
Anti-tech violent extremism.
Right. They are mapping out scenarios where the rapid spread of AI is triggering localized, actual physical backlash.
Yeah, the documents really paint a picture of compounding anxieties. You have that underlying pervasive fear of massive job displacement, which we talk about a lot.
Sure.
But that is quickly escalating into physical confrontations. They're tracking targeted harassment of tech executives and even a rapidly organizing nationwide protest movement that's specifically aiming to disrupt the construction of these hyperscale data centers.
Okay, before we go any further on this, and just to be absolutely clear with you listening, we need to frame the political context surrounding this shift in surveillance. We are strictly looking at the facts exactly as they are presented in these FOIA documents. We are taking absolutely no sides here. We are not endorsing any viewpoints, political or otherwise. We are simply reporting the mechanisms at play.
Right, just laying out what the sources actually say.
Exactly. And the source material states that these shifts in domestic intelligence gathering directly follow President Trump's National Security Presidential Memo 7. And that memo explicitly instructs the DOJ to target anti-American, anti-Christian, and anti-capitalism beliefs.
And, to add to that context, Counterterrorism, Sebastian Gorka, recently released a strategic framework that prioritizes left-wing extremism as a top national threat.
Okay.
So, according to the internal documents, this newly minted focus on anti-tech extremism operates as a previously unreported subcategory under those broader administrative directives.
I see.
Yeah, it establishes a remarkably wide surveillance net under an administration that is, heavily invested in accelerating AI dominance and data center infrastructure.
But wait, let me just challenge this premise for a second.
Sure, go ahead.
If we look at the actual protests happening on the ground, say, like a local community organizing to block a massive data center because it's threatening to drain their municipal water supply, right?
Which happens all the time now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or, maybe it's going to overload their local power grid. Does the federal government genuinely classify that localized environmental pushback as violent extremism?
That is the big question.
Or are we seeing the intelligence apparatus essentially being deployed to protect the infrastructure of tech monopolies from, standard civic friction?
Well, that is the exact tension that civil liberties groups are highlighting as they review this leak.
Right.
Because the fusion centers, which, remember, were originally established post 9/11 to prevent coordinated terrorist attacks,
Right.
are now circulating intelligence bulletins characterizing these localized infrastructure protests as potential precursors to state-sponsored sabotage.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, a Western Pennsylvania fusion center actually circulated a memo explicitly warning that adversarial actors, and they mean anyone from homegrown environmentalists to foreign state sponsors, view U.S. data centers as highly vulnerable strategic targets.
It just completely reframes how we think of the cloud, doesn't it? I mean, the cloud isn't this intangible thing floating in the sky. It's a massive, power-hungry warehouse sitting in a specific zip code.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And it's vulnerable. And the intelligence analysts aren't just tracking civic disputes over water usage either. No, they are dedicating significant resources to tracking incredibly bizarre, fringe ideological offshoots fueled entirely by this AI acceleration.
Oh, right, the NYPD report.
Yes, the New York Intelligence and Counterterrorism Bureau actually has an assessment projecting a 5-year window of localized AI-induced civil unrest.
And that brings us to the most surreal part of this whole leak, the section on Ziz Lyota and a group known as the Zizians. I mean, it literally reads like speculative fiction.
It really does.
This person, Ziz Lyota, is described as a radical rationalist who cultivated a following so extreme that 3 of its members are currently facing murder charges.
And the underlying mechanism of their belief system is what analysts find so concerning because, it operates on this terrifying internal logic.
Walk us through that.
So the Zizians believe the emergence of a godlike artificial superintelligence is just a fixed, imminent inevitability. It's happening.
Okay.
Therefore, they view AI alignment not as a technical hurdle, but as a zero-sum biological survival game. They believe humanity has to aggressively and forcefully ensure this impending system complies with human morality right now.
And if you don't?
They believe failing to do so guarantees absolute human extinction.
I mean, it's basically taking the mainstream academic debate about AI alignment, the exact same debates happening at Frontier Labs right now, and just stripping away all the theoretical guardrails.
Exactly. It weaponizes the philosophy.
And the NYPD assessment actually flags this. They warn that the impending high-profile trial of these Zizian members could inadvertently broadcast and, validate these apocalyptic narratives to a much broader, highly anxious public.
It's the physical manifestation of digital panic. We've built an industry that runs on intangible mathematics, but it requires highly fragile, highly visible physical infrastructure.
Yeah.
And those data centers just become lightning rods for every ounce of societal anxiety, whether it's rational or otherwise.
So that physical lockdown of infrastructure in the U.S. actually mirrors a severe geopolitical lockdown happening on the other side of the globe right now.
A perfect transition.
Right. If the U.S. is surveilling domestic citizens reacting against the physical footprint of AI, well, the Chinese government is currently surveilling and restricting the physical movement of the very people building it.
Yeah, let's look closer at our second story.
So the talent management strategy in Beijing has apparently shifted from aggressive retention to outright confinement.
Confinement is the right word. According to the latest reporting from Bloomberg, top-tier AI researchers and engineers at leading private Chinese firms, companies like Alibaba, DeepSeek, Moonshot AI, StepFun, ByteDance, they are all facing unprecedented travel restrictions right now.
And we aren't just talking about, annoying bureaucratic hurdles for international conferences. These engineers are effectively required to secure explicit government approval just across the border.
Right.
And in many documented cases, they are being forced to physically surrender their passports to state authorities.
Which functions as an informal exit ban, entirely bypassing any sort of judicial review.
Wow.
And look, the state has restricted the travel of government employees before. That's not new. But expanding this net to encompass the private tech sector, that really highlights the existential importance Beijing places on frontier AI development.
Absolutely.
They're acting on three specific mechanisms of fear here. First, just the straightforward safeguarding of proprietary algorithmic architecture from industrial espionage.
Sure, IP theft.
Second, neutralizing the threat of their top talent being detained internationally and leveraged as diplomatic bargaining chips by Washington.
And third, and this is the kicker, they are agonizingly close to completely erasing the capability gap with the U.S., and they simply cannot afford a brain drain right at the finish line.
The data on this is wild.
It is. Look at the data from the Stanford 2026 AI Index. Back in 2023, the performance gap between the frontier U.S. models and the best Chinese equivalents hovered around, roughly 30%.
Right.
Today, despite sweeping U.S. hardware export controls, that gap has collapsed to a razor-thin 2.7%.
It's an astonishing leap in just a few years.
Yeah.
And the big question is how they did it without access to the latest U.S. silicon.
How did they do it?
Well, the data suggests they bypassed the hardware bottleneck by relying heavily on massive synthetic data generation, hyper-aggressive parameter pruning, and honestly, simply utilizing raw, centralized pools of older computing power at just an industrial scale.
Just throwing everything they have at it. Exactly. Currently, China is filing nearly 70% of all global AI patents. They are deploying industrial automation at 9 times the rate of the U.S. They're looking at the telemetry and realizing they are on the absolute cusp of total parity.
But to achieve that parity, they are exerting total control over the financial capital, too, not just the human capital.
Right. It's a two-pronged approach.
Chinese regulatory agencies are aggressively advising domestic AI firms to reject U.S. origin capital in their upcoming funding rounds unless they secure prior explicit clearance.
Which is a huge shift.
It is. And this isn't just theoretical. The Chinese government outright blocked Meta's $2 billion acquisition attempt of Manus, which is a highly promising Chinese AI startup.
And the ripple effects of that blocked acquisition are already reshaping corporate structures. Startups like Moonshot are now actively evaluating corporate reincorporation.
What does that mean exactly? It means they're looking to dismantle their offshore holding structures and legally domicile their headquarters back into mainland China. The regulatory signaling from Beijing is just unmistakable right now. If your corporate entity remains offshore, you are going to face nearly insurmountable hurdles for domestic IPO approvals.
I have to question the long-term viability of this strategy, though. Think about it. You are essentially building a world-class, multi-trillion-dollar intellectual gold mine, right?
Okay, I see where you're going.
But you are confiscating the miners' passports so they can't take their map or their expertise to a competing market. If you trap brilliant, highly sought-after engineers like that, don't you inherently run the risk of an internal brain drain? Aren't you going to crush the very innovation you're trying to protect if these people feel like prisoners?
It is a massive, calculated gamble, without a doubt. But thus far, the data actually supports Beijing's heavy-handed approach.
Really?
Yeah. AI talent migration from China to the United States has plummeted by 89% since 2017. The talent is staying.
Yeah, but staying doesn't necessarily equal innovating.
Precisely. And for global investors, this introduces a massive, opaque category of risk that completely evades traditional balance sheet analysis.
Because you can't just look at revenue anymore.
Right. Investors are now forced to monitor secondary and tertiary signals. You have to watch the publication velocity of specific research teams. You have to monitor if key engineers are suddenly being rotated into obscured advisory roles.
That sounds exhausting for an analyst.
Oh, it is. Because enforcing this level of draconian travel restriction across an ecosystem that is rapidly expanding from a few dozen executives to tens of thousands of working researchers, it's going to be incredibly difficult to sustain without fundamentally fracturing morale.
Wow. So we've unpacked the physical friction of data centers being targeted, right? And the geopolitical friction of international talent being locked behind national borders. For our final story, let's observe how this exact same friction is penetrating the digital borders deep inside the corporate firewall. Because, spoiler alert, Those internal defenses are currently failing at an astonishing rate.
They really are. The final segment of the Morning Star report pivots directly to internal corporate networks. At a recent industry event, Francis D'Souza, he's the COO of Google Cloud, delivered a really stark assessment of what the industry is calling shadow AI.
Okay, let's elevate that term for a second. Because shadow AI isn't just, an employee discreetly using a consumer language model to draft a polite email.
No, it's way beyond that now.
Right. It acts more like a pervasive, unchecked root system. If you try to pull up one unauthorized AI tool your marketing team integrated, you quickly realize it has entangled itself into the HR database, the shared cloud drives, the client billing portals. The roots are everywhere, and they have total access.
And that root system is exactly what makes the current threat landscape so devastating. I mean, D'Souza's core argument is that network security can no longer operate as a reactive compliance measure.
Because it's just too slow.
Exactly. The sheer velocity of modern cyber threats has rendered traditional human oversight entirely obsolete.
This specific metric from the report is just staggering to me. D'Souza noted that historically, the average dwell time, meaning the window between an initial network breach and the attacker laterally moving to the next stage of exploitation, that window hovered around 8 hours.
8 hours?
Right, which gives a dedicated IT team a reasonable window to detect an anomaly, isolate the affected servers, and mitigate the threat. But today...
Yeah, brace yourself.
That lateral movement window has collapsed from 8 hours to exactly 22 seconds.
22 seconds. It's almost hard to comprehend.
It is.
Because you are no longer defending against human operators sitting in a dark room typing commands into a terminal. You are defending against autonomous AI agents that never sleep.
They don't take coffee breaks.
Nope. These agents utilize recursive queries to instantly map active directories. They are specifically trained to identify and exploit legacy infrastructure. We're talking deprecated endpoints, ancient SharePoint instances, outdated access controls that a company's current IT staff likely doesn't even know exist anymore.
Wow.
They find the vulnerability, they exploit the cache, and they extract the data in less time than it takes a security analyst to pour a cup of coffee.
Which brings us to a terrifying term coined by LinkedIn's Chief Information Security Officer, Leah Kistner. They are calling this the impending bug apocalypse.
The bug apocalypse is perfectly named, honestly.
Yeah.
It's the mathematical reality of AI-generated code.
How so?
Well, large language models are allowing developers to ship features at an unprecedented velocity, which is great for business, but they're simultaneously introducing complex vulnerabilities faster than human security teams can possibly identify and patch them.
The teams just can't keep up.
No, the labor market is already buckling under the pressure. Glassdoor data from Q1 shows cybersecurity job postings surging by 11% year over year. Executive search firms are literally turning away enterprise clients because the pool of qualified talent capable of architecting AI-native defense systems is just entirely tapped out.
So D'Souza's solution to all this is that we must meet machine speed with machine speed, right?
Yeah.
Deploying fully agentic AI-native defense systems.
That's his pitch, yeah.
But we really have to address the glaring irony here. We have the COO of Google Cloud lecturing enterprises on the necessity of rigid platform governance. Meanwhile, Google's own developer community is currently getting absolutely crushed by massive unauthorized billing spikes directly caused by Google's own AI integration policies.
Yeah, that is the elephant in the room. The Register documented this systemic failure, and it perfectly illustrates the dangers of legacy infrastructure colliding with AI capabilities.
Break down what happened.
So independent developers who held old, dormant API keys, and these were keys originally provisioned specifically for low-stakes, low-cost Google Maps queries, they suddenly discovered their accounts were totally compromised and racking up exorbitant charges.
We are talking about severe financial damage here, not just a few bucks. Rod Dannon, a startup CEO, was hit with a $10,138 bill in roughly 30 minutes after malicious actors exploited a dormant key.
30 minutes.
30 minutes. And Isuru Fonseca, a developer in Sydney, he woke up to a $17,000 Australian dollar charge, despite having a hard-coded $250 spending cap actively in place on his account.
And the underlying mechanism of this failure is entirely on Google's end.
Oh, absolutely.
They quietly and without explicit administrative consent expanded the scope of those legacy maps API keys. They basically allow them to authenticate and access their highly expensive Gemini inference models.
Just upgraded them automatically.
Yeah. And furthermore, Google's automated backend systems dynamically escalated the billing thresholds on these accounts. in some cases up to $100,000 based purely on historical account age. It completely overrode the developer's manual spending caps.
It is a textbook example of shadow AI escalation happening at the highest possible level of the platform provider. But the technical analysis provided by the security research firm Aikido actually makes this situation exponentially worse.
This is the part that blew my mind.
Because what actually happens when a developer catches this breach in real time and attempts to revoke the compromised API key?
Right, so this is where the 22-second attack speed becomes an absolute nightmare.
Okay.
According to Aikido's lead researcher, Joseph Leon, if a developer identifies the compromised key and permanently deletes it from their console, like they hit delete, it's gone, the malicious actors can continue to successfully authenticate and exfiltrate data using that exact same deleted key for up to 23 minutes.
Wait. Let's make sure we understand the mechanics of this. The passcode is digitally destroyed by the user. It's trash. But the door remains wide open for nearly half an hour.
Correct.
How is that possible?
Because Google's legacy maps architecture wasn't built for zero-trust security. It was built for maximum query speed. It relies on a globally distributed asynchronous caching system.
Okay, translate that for us.
So when a developer revokes a key, that invalidation token has to manually propagate and overwrite the cached permissions across thousands of edge servers globally. That architectural latency takes 23 minutes.
And during that window?
During that window, attackers are scraping databases, they're running heavy inference workloads, and they're stealing cached Gemini chat logs. They basically have free reign.
And Aikido noted that Google's modern credential formats, like their current service account architecture, can successfully propagate a revocation in roughly 5 seconds.
Exactly, 5 seconds compared to 23 minutes.
So this isn't an unsolvable law of physics at a global computing scale. It is strictly a matter of corporate infrastructure priority. Google is choosing not to force the migration of these legacy systems because, well, it would introduce friction to their developer base.
And that choice defines the core vulnerability of the bug apocalypse. You have autonomous offensive agents operating laterally through a network in 22 seconds. But the defensive administrative protocols provided by the tech giant themselves, they're operating at the speed of legacy asynchronous caching. 23 minutes.
It's a huge mismatch.
That massive architectural delta is where the data is lost, and it's where the financial damage is done. Until cloud providers prioritize immediate zero-trust revocation over legacy uptime, everyday businesses are essentially leaving their digital infrastructure completely defenseless.
It just completely recontextualizes the speed of modern business, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
Well, before we finalize our thoughts on today's reports, a quick thanks to Old Glory, an iconic music and sports fan merch store. Perfect for the techie in your life. Use promo code SNARFL for 15% off at oldglory.com. All right, let's synthesize the real-world impact of the Morningstar reports we unpacked today. We are watching the theoretical capabilities of artificial intelligence generate highly tangible, highly disruptive friction across every layer of society.
Yeah, we are witnessing it manifest physically in local municipalities, with citizens organizing against the massive resource demands of data centers, while federal intelligence agencies simultaneously categorize those protests under the umbrella of anti-tech violent extremism.
And we are seeing it dictate geopolitical strategy as global superpowers like China effectively trap their top engineering talent within their borders just to ensure they win the capability race, which fundamentally alters the flow of global financial capital in the process.
And of course, we are experiencing it deep inside the architecture of our corporate networks, where the devastating 22-second speed of AI-driven breaches is colliding with the 23-minute latency of legacy security protocols, fueling an incredibly expensive, industry-wide bug apocalypse.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to mull over as you go about your day. We started by discussing how the digital abstraction of AI is crashing into our physical reality.
Right.
As these systems continue to operate and exploit at absolute machine speed, integrating themselves deeper into our financial systems, our critical infrastructure, our daily professional lives, who is ultimately responsible when the technology we mandate moves significantly faster than human oversight can actually comprehend?
That is the multi-trillion-dollar question.
I mean, when an autonomous agent breaches a network in 22 seconds, but the platform provider takes 23 minutes to lock the door, who carries the liability for the fallout?
Well, the legal and structural frameworks to answer that question simply do not exist yet, but the market is going to force a resolution very, very soon.
We're here to help at Snarful, so reach out on our website if you have any more questions.
That's a wrap on today's top stories. Remember, tech doesn't have to be complicated, and we're here to help connect the dots. If you've got questions or want to learn more, visit us at snarful.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.